was your I need to grow up moment that actually made you grow up? Story 1, when I was 22 to 23, I would always insult my brother as a joke. I never complimented him or anything. One day, he kind of exploded on me, and before I could say something, I realized he was right. All I did was try to bring him down for no reason. I stopped, which ironically enough annoyed him for a while, because I would throw in compliments and stopped insulting him. Story 2, in my late 20s, my mom needed open heart surgery, so I moved home for over a year to look after her. Up until that point, I honestly can't think of a single responsible thing I had really done. Story 3, when my mom was dying, I had to square with a whole lot of it up and deal moments with myself, so that could get done. She had been sick for a long while, but had always been private about it until the last few months when she was rapidly getting worse, especially when my grandmother also got horribly ill at the same time. I got used to the sight smell of bile real fast, and with the fact that I needed to catch my mom's puke in a bowl. Because she couldn't walk to the toilet, I got used to spending nights, weekends in hospital rooms, so that mom would have someone with her while dad was checking in on grandma. I got used to calmly talking about end-of-life arrangements, because that stuff had to be taken care of. I even got used to not being able to talk about it with anyone, because who was I going to spill to? Everyone else in the family was dealing with a much worse scenario than I was. It sucked horribly, and it was the worst year of my life, but it was definitely a growing experience in terms of just learning how to get done, even in the most horrific circumstances. Story 4, I started teaching right out of college at age 22. I got a job in a Title I school teaching 5th grade science and social studies. Most students were held back at least once, and I had several students who were 12 and 13 years old. On the first day of school, I remember feeling so strange that I could shut my classroom door and be trusted to be responsible for the science and civic education of 93 sections of 30 kids, 5th graders. At age 22, my first few years of teaching taught me a lot about how the world worked. I also grew a thick skin, learned to stand up for myself, and developed a desire to always improve myself. Story 5, arrested for BDFI, being a drunken idiot. Realized that almost every problem in my life was related to the fact that I was acting like a drunken frat boy at 27 years old. I never quit drinking completely, but I stopped making it the focal point of my life. My entire life turned around immediately. Story 6, walking into the rehab center. I had left 6 months prior, December 2006. I had been a drug addict for 15 years, and even the people who desperately loved me were about to cut me off. I knew in my heart that this was my last chance to get my life in order, otherwise it would be the end. Story 7, a key moment in my development happened in a summer job I had when I was 18. One of my duties at this small industrial facility was to open up the garage-style overhead doors at the start of the day and close them at the end. One day, I went to close them and discovered one had been pulled so far up that the roller had come out of its track, and I couldn't get it to go back down. I got Frank, the low man on the totem pole at this place besides me, and the other summer hand. He looked up at it and said, "Did you do this?" I hemmed and hawed and explained that it wasn't my fault, that there should have been a stop or a guide or something to keep that from happening. Again, he asked, "Did you do this?" Again, I evaded. Finally, he said, "Stop making excuses. Admit you up, and let's fix it." I almost uttered some more bullshit, but instead said, "Yeah, I did that up. Let's fix it." And we did. That lesson is still fresh after a third of a century. Edit to be clear, and the one that pulled the thing off track. Some people are opining that this was bullshit, that it wasn't my fault, and that I shouldn't have been held responsible. They're completely missing the point. Sure, you can parse the situation to where it wasn't my fault, but that's a waste of energy. It's so much simpler to own up to your own actions. Yes, I pulled it up too far, and it came off the track. This simple, true admission cuts past all the ifs, and buts, clearing the way for me to spend energy seeking a solution instead of playing defense. Story 8, realizing that I want to spend my life with someone, but don't have the means to move in with them, get married, start a life, etc. I started driving. I haven't driven due to fear and mostly got rides everywhere and got a real job. I'm saving up to get home with my partner so we can have a happy life together. Edit, writing most of my replies at work, just finishing my lunch break. I'm proud of myself for pushing myself to get here to this point, and I want you all to know that you can do it too. I believe in you. Story 9, I was 15. I had a stepfather who hated kids, and my mom had four, me being the youngest. The eldest two bailed as soon as they had the chance because our family was terribly dysfunctional. Stepdad would get drunk and abuse my mom. We tried many times to stop him or get the cops involved, but she always backed him up, so at her dog, her fleas, there came a day when stepdad decided that he didn't want to abuse mom. He's come upstairs after me. Being a malnourished 15-year-old facing a drunken ex-boxer with a history of violence was enough to make a boy freeze up. I couldn't freeze up, though, or my life would basically be over. I couldn't let the next 5 minutes go his way. So by the time he got to the top of the steps, I was waiting for him with a baseball bat. Not as much of an equalizer as Sam Colt would recommend, but it did the trick. I beat the monster. I grew up, my mom and stepdad moved out almost immediately. Her choosing him over us, she said when we graduated high school, she'd sell the house. So be ready. But my next oldest brother was just him, and me at that point was into drinking and threw me out. Good times. Edit thank you for my first gold. Kind Redditor, I have been answering some questions below. Perhaps I should write that book. I hear that all the time. Story 10, I had a child. It wasn't just me and my adult, fully capable wife who could take up the slack if I screwed up. I now had this helpless little person relying on me. Until she was born, I hadn't held a job for over a year. I then had that job for 8 years, and when I did switch jobs, there was a significant pay increase, and now I've been there 4 years. Story 11, right when I graduated college and moved out on my own, I received around $100K inheritance and started spending money like it was nothing, to the point where I finally checked my financials and realized I had spent $30K in 9 months. It was only when I ran through the numbers that I realized I was being a total, complete idiot. I think this really helped later on in life, though it caused me to save and invest as much money as possible, even when I had a really well-paying job. While people on my level were buying either a Lexus or a Mercedes, I was clinging on to my Honda Civic, then later bought a Prius. Story 12, when I realized that I needed to start socializing with people. Otherwise, I couldn't get anywhere in life. I'm mostly an introvert, and I hate to go outside because the grind never stops. At some point, though, I realized that if I never socialized, I wouldn't make any friends and would never feel good about myself whatsoever. Ever since that moment, I started going out with people, chatting with people online. I started expressing myself a little better and might have a girlfriend soon. Honestly, a good thing. If this all fits as a grow-up moment, but I hope it does. Story 13, living with roommates. As a teenager and in my early 20s, I figured being lazy with dishes wasn't that big a deal. It's just a little smelly. It's nothing some elbow grease and barkeeper's friend can't make good as new. Right, washing dishes is a pain. It's annoying. My feet hurt. My belly gets all wet. It's no big deal if I let them sit. Then I lived with roommates who didn't do their dishes for days at a time. Left them to sit with nasty, starchy food on them, to rot and stink. Put them in the drying side for weeks at a time, and never put them away. I was forced to wash my dishes by hand because there was only room around the sink for me to hold up a single plate over their mountain of dishes and wash it slowly, so as not to get soap on the drying side, which probably would have helped. The things on that side frequently weren't even clean, the rare moments when the sink was clear like a rainbow for me. I would stare at it, sometimes just overjoyed that I could use the sink. I could cook in the kitchen and let my pans cool down instead of burn my hands cleaning them immediately after cooking, leading to my food getting cold. But inevitably within 2 or 3 days it'd be full again, and the cycle continues. We moved out because of this. We couldn't stand being in the kitchen because it was a complete sty. For 128 of the 132 days we lived there, we were supposed to save money there, but we just spent the same amount as usual by eating out for every meal because we were too grossed out to use the kitchen or even just be in the house sometimes. It really made me realize how nasty I had been before this, how unfucking real it was to assume people would be fine with nasty in my sink and a gross kitchen. I no longer leave dishes in the sink for more than 24 hours. If it went at 9 p.m. last night, it comes out before 8 p.m. tonight. I don't even use a dishwasher anymore. I hand wash everything pretty much immediately because it was so traumatizing to see how dirty the on the drying side was. I don't trust machines anymore. I made a lot of excuses for myself as a teenager. I made my mom's life that much worse by shirking my one chore because it's gross and my feet hurt. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I'm an adult. It sucks, but it's not that hard. And then I get to have a clean kitchen, which is a genuinely healing experience. Story 14, after I dropped out of college. I worked at a Home Depot as a cashier for a while. Then I got fired for never showing up on time. After not being able to cut it as a cashier in retail, I thought it's probably time to get my act together. I did currently write code that organizes financial data. Story 15, my parents started making dinner only for me and saying they already ate. Me being a dumb kid of 16-ish, I just believed it. Eventually, I put the pieces together. They hadn't eaten. They were prioritizing feeding me. And we were hurting real bad financially. I went into town and got a job at Carl Jr. First paycheck, I bought groceries as a surprise. Sure enough, they had dinner with me that night. My mom later on told me her dad had done the same thing when money was tight. My family is incredibly diehard loyal to their kids. Story 16, I went to a party where I knew my ex was going to be with his girlfriend. We dated for about 4 years and had been broken up for 2 years at that point. He started dating his girlfriend within a few months of us breaking up, and I guess I hadn't gotten over how much that hurt me. So I brought a date to the party, told everybody he was my boyfriend, and got absolutely trashed. I woke up the next day and hated myself. I realized I needed to let it go, so I did. That was a huge growing up moment for me. Story 17, realizing that going to IT school to become a programmer when I wasn't even interested in that line of work was why I had depression, was alone, and always angry. I now am going for art and design, have incredibly calmed down, and found myself the love of my life. Story 18, when I was 23, I got my supervisor pregnant. I broke up with her right before she told me. We decided the best course of action was to give the baby up for adoption. The mother had undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. She was practically a textbook case and came from a toxic family. So I spent 9 agonizing months putting up with emotional abuse and manipulation to make sure she went through with it and save that little boy from a life of... We gave him to a nice gay couple. The mother hates me and blames me. I still feel like what I did was the most fatherly thing I could do at the time. If he wants to look me up when he's older, he'll be waiting. Story 19, woke up on the median in the busiest part of town, passing in and out on acid. No shoes, no shirt, and my car keys 10 miles away from home. Called my parents at 5:30 a.m. and knew what had to be done. Story 20, when I had been doing ecstasy 2 to 3 times a week for over a year, memory was ridiculous, could barely string a sentence properly without thoroughly thinking it through, felt mad anxious about everyone and everything, probably due to lack of serotonin. Finding it difficult to spell words that I previously could. I think the correct term is fried. I've now been a month ecstasy sober, which may seem small to you. However, this is the longest it's been since I first started doing them, and I feel better already. I'm not saying I'll never touch ecstasy again, but that part of my life is definitely past me. If I do it again, I will certainly not let myself fall down that deep dark hole again, but rather for a bit of fun every now and again. It could be a beautiful drug in moderation, and I don't care what anybody says, it is definitely mentally addictive. Story 21, when I was 15, I had to kick out one of my mother's clients when she was getting raped, prostituting herself to put food on the table. Didn't have much of a childhood and don't speak with my family much anymore. Just made sure they were off well enough to no longer need me. Forgot how to have fun and experience joy in general. Always being serious about the tiniest thing, but I'm on my way back. Story 22, a mentor and a man I admired greatly listened to me, tell him why. Once again, my up wasn't my fault. He looked me straight in the eye and quietly said, I had really high expectations for you, and you haven't shown me a thing, ouch, that turned me around. It took a few years, but I earned his respect again, and I promised myself I would never hear someone say that to me again. Story 23, this past week, I divorced my wife of 2 years a few months ago. It was amicable, so no hard feelings toward her, but once I got my own apartment, I took a deep nosedive into alcoholism, completely wasted every night. It was a wonder I actually showed up to work every day. I got used to being hung over at work as the norm, and went straight home to drink another 24-pack alone in my shitty little apartment every night. This inevitably led to lack of sleep, which combined with all the alcohol, started giving me a warped, though still barely functioning view of myself and the world. Luckily, I had a friend who I could rant to through FB Messenger and explain how depressed and drunk I was and how I love humanity, but hated myself for such an action. She was extremely helpful in letting me vent, but obviously I was getting worse and worse. After a few months of this, I started getting into well-intentioned bar fights and swiping through Tinder, falling in love for a day and coming on super strong, then completely changing my mind and breaking all these random girls' hearts. It's like my body upped the testosterone or something. All the while, feeling like I was saving the world by saving myself or something. Finally, the friend who I would drunkenly rant to suggested that I go back and read through all our conversations sober. So that's what I did this Monday. It was pretty entertaining, but very eye-opening. I went home that night and drank the one beer I happened to have left in the fridge and haven't had another since. I've been cleaning up my apartment, apologizing to all the random girls, practicing the piano, and trying to eat healthier. I even have something of a job interview tomorrow. It's really surprising how good it feels to actually get enough sleep and not be hungover all day. Let's just hope it sticks this time. Story 24, when I was 16, my mother had to leave me alone 2 weeks at a time to go to work as a carer abroad. At first it was great, but then a very dark anxiety set in. It was then that I realized that I had to do things for myself and push on with schoolwork. I could have easily sat back in the darkness I was feeling and let myself go, but instead I decided to grow up. Story 25, took 5 to 6 grams of shrooms while I was almost blackout drunk. Had the worst night of my life. Hallucinated so bad that I thought reality was just made up in my head and that I was actually on the side of the road bleeding out. Came down after a few hours, but for the next 6 or so months, I still had this nagging thought that I was in a coma and people in hospital were trying to get through to me, had horrible anxiety attacks and audible hallucinations until one night I hit a bong and started tripping again. spent the night in the psych ward, and spent the next few days seeing psychiatrists. I was suffering from PTSD from an episode of drug-induced psychosis. I'm betterish now. But that was the moment I realized I needed to clean up my act and start acting like an adult. Edit y'all are. Still have episodes of PTSD, and all the wake-up comments are horribly inappropriate. I guess that's what I get for putting my actual name in my username. Story 26, got a job I hated every day, and then wallowing in self-pity and petty office moaning. After months of it, I just woke up one day and thought about what I was doing. I could either keep on making myself and others around me miserable, I could shut up, or I could walk away. Sounds silly, but up until that moment, I forgot I had a choice in the matter. Handed my notice in, and went on a road trip for 3 months, and without exaggeration, I've never been happier. Story 27, it was a multi-step progress for me. My parents divorced when I was 5, and I saw what it did with my older brother and my mom. It started with me not accepting pocket money, to doing chores around our house to help her out. My father is pretty well off, but my mom wasn't after the divorce, so giving her my money was kind of natural for me. Then, as I got older and understood more and more what a piece of human garbage my father really is, I stopped visiting him. He cheated on my mom for 2 years, and the marriage started when he had a 3- and 5-year-old son at home with his secretary, and that later became my stepmother. Then I found out he was lying about his income to pay less child support. My brother started to drift towards the bad side of life due to his lack of father figure. He was more attached to my father than I was as a kid. I was more of a mommy boy. So when things got rough at home, with my brother and my mom fighting during my early teens, I stepped up even more as the man in the house. In the end, I grew up being the person that could be relied on, and I kept it this way my entire life so far. I've always been 100 there for friends when necessary, because I grew up with not having people to really rely on. Don't misunderstand me, my mom is awesome and did everything for us, but having to work so much, she wasn't home so much, and she struggled a lot with all the trouble my father put us through. So being a pillar for my mom and brother made me into the adult I needed to be, even if it was teens. Another thing that gave me another wake-up call, in a different direction, was when I was diagnosed with a genetic disorder that shortens my lifespan quite a lot, about 50 years, and gives me chronic pain. I was really focused on just getting the best possible job to earn as much money as possible. I didn't want to be so poor like we were growing up, but when I got the diagnosis, I switched to only wanting enough money to live comfortably and not spending my time at work, but with friends and my girlfriend. Now I'm 22, and I used to have my dream job, which I needed to stop due to medical reasons. But I know what working a job you love is like. I have enough money to enjoy life without having to worry about anything. I have an amazing girlfriend and the best friends I could wish for. I live together with my 2 best friends. We have tons of fun daily, and our circle of friends is a varied bunch who are all 100 there for each other. I don't think I would have gotten much, if any of this, if I would have grown up differently or didn't have my diagnosis. Story 28, what was your I need to grow up moment that actually made you grow up? This one, Vietnam, 1968, a Shao Valley, deep jungle, excerpted from the Year of the Snake, as I said. The stream was crystalline. I could see all the way to the bottom. On one side of my rock was something that was clearly the tail of a large, dark emerald green snake. On the other side was the head of the same snake. Almost touching my bootless foot, I knew a little bit about snakes. Triangular head. Yep, this is bad. I was sitting very still. I estimated the snake at about 5 feet long. I moved in slow-mo. First, my foot directly away from the snake's head. No side-to-side movement. Then I shifted over to the snake tail side of the rock and sloshed away. When I felt safer, I looked back. The snake was still there, but now I could see a huge red cut where the snake was wrapped around the upstream side of my rock. The ARVN sergeant had almost sliced him in two. He was hanging together by a shred. Me too, this no. What was I doing out there without my gear, not even a knife? What was I thinking? Did I imagine the war would stop while I took a bath? Did I think the war wasn't real? Might as well think bamboo vipers aren't real. All it means is that when some viper drops in on your space, you'll lose valuable time complaining. This can't be happening. I didn't like bamboo vipers well enough to give them that edge. I didn't like the war either. I moved to the bank thinking furiously as I dressed and geared up. Look at the gunny top soldier. He's careful. He keeps his gear about him. Yet, if he had stood up, maybe that snake would have climbed back into the bamboo. Maybe it would have bitten him on the helmet, maybe on the neck, and that would be all she wrote for the gunny. That's what it's like here. Death is here. What is the matter with me that I can't see that? Am I afraid? Well, yeah, but I know not so much. Am I more afraid to ignore my death, let it catch me in some move, and leave me forever a dead fool? Good riddance, yeah, that not acceptable. I need to wake thee up. One of the nights passing around the Courvoisier, Lieutenant H had made some remark about having breakfast with your own death. I think it was in the context that if you keep your death in sight and close about you, things like Courvoisier taste much better. The phrase struck me as I stood streamside. Breakfast with your own death. I own my life. I need to own my death. I can't let it surprise me, come out of left field. I want to see it come. I want to meet it. I'm not willing to die as a fool hiding his head in the sand, pretending it's not real, pretending I'm immortal. My death belongs to me as much as my life. I needed to get both into some kind of order. I sloshed back to the middle of the stream and picked up the Viper with the bayonet into my rifle. It did. Took the snake upstream to where the gunny was. Maybe he wanted it. Maybe he had some gunny sergeant magic in his ruck that would turn the Viper into a nice dinner. If so, I'd have to eat lightly. Company was coming for breakfast tomorrow. I wanted to have an appetite. The look of disappointment on my wife's face when we received our third eviction notice while on vacation with my family. I spent the money on everything else rather than paying bills first. Story 29, my first boss asking me a question he didn't know the answer to. He knew I knew, and he actually needed me. I was useful. I wasn't just a kid anymore. I was someone who knew something. I still quietly thank him on a regular basis for that huge chunk of my self-esteem. Thank you, Hans. Story 30, realizing that my parents don't care about me at all. I was only 10, but since then I've done everything that needs to be done. I raised myself. I was my own parent. Story 31, I'm not sure if this counts, but when I realized how toxic my life was around me, family, professionally diagnosed mental health, abusive relationships, etc., I finally realized I needed to get my together and be a grown-up. I got myself out of my family's house and moved into my own apartment with 2 people, and I fell in love with one of them, and we're talking about getting married now. Story 32, when I was on a swing at the park with my friend and a mother, and her kids came in. The kids were speaking to her, and I heard her say, just ask the nice ladies if you can have a turn. I was like, oh, we are adult women taking up room in an area for children. When there are children here, no matter how much fun I was having, it wasn't a space for me right now. We got up sharpish. Story 33, the context, late 20s, no steady job, reasonable income from IT consultancy, but very irregular. Then the girlfriend became pregnant. I told her I'd support her no matter what she chose. 3 months and I landed an 8-week fixed-term contract on the lower rungs of a large corporate IT department. 6 months later, they just plain gave me a job. That was in 2010, and I'm still there now. Story 34, getting semi-caught in high school, taking drugs. Realized how shitty they had been making me feel and how I wanted to kill myself all the time, and realized drunk driving and popping pills weren't the answer. Got my grades up, got a summer job that I loved, and pretty much went from feeling like complete 247 to feeling the best I ever had. Story 35, am transgender. When I came out, my liberal, non-religious mother was not having it. I wound up blowing my life savings and almost becoming homeless, trying to fund a teaching certificate that I let her prod me into the thinking being, I believe, that transition would be impossible as a teacher. Going from having $25K in savings to having 500, no job, and no place was quite the wake-up call. It's taken nearly a decade, but I have been able to transition and have facial feminization surgery. In a few months, I'm about to have that surgery. I consider myself extremely lucky considering some trans people's nightmares. Being in debt for the next 5 to 7 years is a small price to pay for normalcy. Imo. But I think the effect of that experience is that I finally know not to look for sympathy or fairness from anyone, including family members. Story 36, at 16, when my mother had a stroke. Then at 17, when she moved out, I was forced to provide for myself. Right now I'm going through a rough patch and want to cry, but I've learned if I keep doing my thing, it'll get things back to normal. It's just so hard. Even when I have friends that support me emotionally, I don't want to dump all my problems on them, and some stuff I don't have answers to. I'm 31, and I hope once I complete my education in a few years and start making more money, I could being so scared of losing everything, and my anxiety will be better. Story 37, right after I finished high school, me and my mom had our house foreclosed on that ID, lived in my entire life. It was the middle of the summer, and we had to move all of our stuff out, including emptying a fridge freezer in 100-degree heat with no AC. Losing your childhood home is really something if you get that far in life without hopping from place to place. It was weird. Story 38, having such high standards for women I was potentially interested in, yet being a lazy, unemployed snob myself. It was the people that I was hanging out with that made me feel like I was the greatest person ever, because even though I wasn't anywhere near amazing, I thought I was the same compared to them. I thought just because I was book smart and funny it'd be enough to get me a beautiful girl who looks after herself, cares for her body, family-oriented, smart, funny, etc., etc. I actually managed to get a girl like that interested in me. But after losing a girl like that saw the potential in me despite months of me letting her down, I realized how stupid I was for having this mentality sooner than later. I've been going to the gym 5 to 6 days a week for a year now. I dropped all of my toxic friends. I stopped partying, drinking. I've looked out for my health a lot more than before. I'm saving up for a car so that I can stop having to borrow my mom's and a whole bunch of stuff that's slipping my mind at the moment. But you get the gist. Story 39, I was spending my probation period at my first job. It was supposed to be 3 months, so I thought I didn't really have to work hard during the first few weeks because they would wait until the end of the probation to decide if I could stay or not. I was wrong. They fired me after 3 weeks. Story 40, M11, stepdad's a blackout drunk. Mom's a workaholic, my sister's 6, and I haven't eaten in several days. No parents for almost 112 weeks. No food. Power just goes off. I realized if I didn't do something, we wouldn't make it. First time in my life, snuck in a neighbor's house and made us butter sandwiches. We ate with smiles. It just goes downhill from here, but that day, I became a man. Sorry for being a thief. I didn't know how to process. Story 41, slightly different. Eve raised 2 wonderful children. I can run a household and budget efficiently, hold a full-time job, and all the other grown-up things adults do. But Eve never really felt that Eve actually grown up. I look at other people my age and think they're grown up, but feel I'm just kind of faking it. TBH. Story 42. I had to kill a chicken with my friend with my bare hands when I was 11. It happened on a Boy Scout camp. When my leader explains to me the serious task, I cried. I didn't want to kill that poor chicken just to have some food for that evening. I told myself that this is it. I need to grow up now. I killed a chicken, and I grew up a lot in that exact moment. It is a quite common thing to do for the Boy Scouts in my country. The reason this tradition exists is to show us that death is a phase of life and even necessary for us. Story 43. I was 20 years old in some sort of expedition or hiking in a mountain with my mother's friends, kids around 16 to 18, and they wanted to go inside this cave. We were just playing around, but one of them almost fell. I managed to catch him and thought, man, I almost had to call an adult here. Then I realized the reason they were able to go up there was because I was entrusted as the adult me. I just hit me. OMFG, I'm an adult. I need to get my together now. My parents gave me a year to get out of the house. Took me 8 months to save up for a down payment for my first house. Story 44, when I dated an older woman and I saw she had plans on getting married, having kids, etc. I did everything I could so she could see I was also ready for this. Bought a house and a car so she could see that she could live a decent life with me. We broke up. Story 45, when my ex that I lived with for a year suddenly moved out without notice. I was left to live alone for the very first time in my life. I had a part-time job, went out every weekend, and was completely dependent on him. Now, I've lived alone for the last 2 years, have a full-time job, and I'm working on getting back into the dating world. Things have been tough, but I'm more mature now. I later learned that one of the reasons my ex left was because he thought I'd never amount to anything in life. Well, guess who just got accepted into college? I'm starting my life the way I want to, and he'll do great. He can't tell me he'll never amount to anything. I'm proving him wrong. Story 46, total in my car after years of driving recklessly and going way above the speed limit. I'm now the most cautious driver in my neighborhood who drives exactly the speed limit and signals way before I have to. Story 47, I remember hanging out with some new friends when I was 18. Up until that point, I could tell they liked hanging out with me, but I didn't feel like I was part of the group. We get high. And it's like my second time. One of them turns to me and goes, you know, you talk a lot, man. For half a second, I got mad. And then I realized he was right. I was annoying. I learned about situational awareness that day and how I present myself. I have way more friends now. Story 48, after I broke up with my then boyfriend and realized that up until that point I'd been defaulting my decisions and beliefs to how others wanted me to live my life, my parents, my grandparents, and that I hadn't fully developed my personhood due to my dysfunctional upbringing. So I decided to heal myself, get to know myself, and rebuild myself. All this while keeping myself away from dating in order to find what I really want and need in a partner. I feel shame that I've been healing for a few years because all of a sudden I'm 29 and only starting to get things together with my life. However, knowing that I chose the right path gives me the courage to believe that being a late bloomer that is taking things seriously and building a brighter future is better than having had to start over later in life as a result of my bad decisions.